Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 2 by 2 podcast. This week is Thanksgiving week, and we're serving something up that I think is a bit seasonally fitting. My guest is Pradnya Haldipur. She is a very seasoned fundraising and development strategist from the nonprofit world. And she has raised 7, 8, I'm assuming, I bet you've raised 9-figure gifts,
I
maybe
have.
once or twice. I have, yeah, I figured. 10?
No, not there yet. Yet.
I was going to play that game like at a wedding where they say, okay, how long have you been married? And sit down until they have. So we're at 9 figures. Okay,
Yes.
no shade there. That's pretty amazing. And she's spent decades in large organizations, including Doctors Without Borders. So I am very grateful that you've joined us today, Pradnya, to share your experiences, both as a strategist, as a leader, and now as a fractional consultant, where you've had a lot of early success that I noticed. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation today. So thank you for joining.
Well, thank you, Lauren, for having me. Let me express my gratitude for this conversation. And you're right, it is a good time of year to be talking about this. A lot of organizations are in the midst of Q4 anxiety as the year end comes, as the tax year comes to a close, and you and me and everyone else is going to start getting all of those well-intended philanthropic solicitations in our mailboxes and our email boxes. And it's the world we live in the nonprofit sector, trying to get people to look up and pay attention, to break through the noise, and to try to bring in the resources that every organization needs to support its mission.
Yeah. Well, you've had a long career in this world. I want to get here to the point. Why or what made you make the decision in such a role? So it would be helpful here. You give us a little context about what you were doing, but what were you doing
Yeah.
and what helped you make that decision to move in, to be independent into a fractional role?
Yeah, that is the core question. I have been a nonprofit lifer, literally since university days, doing internships to June of 2025. In some capacity or another, I was in a nonprofit organization or adjacent to. And yes, I took the leap. I am now working as a solopreneur, fractional consultant, whatever you want to call it, building a business. But the thing that has not changed is my adjacency to the NGO, nonprofit, civil society sector. And why did I do it? Because ultimately I've reached a point in my career where I feel like both I have the skills and experience. I've seen all the things, or many of the things I should say, because nobody's ever seen everything. But I've seen many things and feel like I can apply that skill and experience in a much more direct way when I work with clients, rather than being one contributor, even a contributor managing teams, being one contributor inside one organization. And I will
When did
also
you make?
say, sorry, go ahead.
No, keep going.
Well, I was going to say that literally my career, let's call it, pivoted this past summer. I decided I was going to hang out my shingle and think about those things I've never had to think about, like, oh, right, I need a logo. I need a name for my business. I need to think about marketing. I need to think about outreach. But more importantly, I had a good think about where I could do the most good and what kinds of organizations, where could I do well to add value above and beyond the hard work that I know the folks within the organization are already doing.
Do you think so? When you're thinking through that question,
Mm-hmm.
do you think the answer is unique to you, or do you think the answer is there are characteristics of organizations where people like you, meaning, well-experienced fractionals or
Mm-hmm.
advisors, can
Mm-hmm.
make an impact? This is a
That's
unique fit question is really my question here.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. I do not think it is unique to the field. I think that many, many NGOs and nonprofit organizations could benefit from an outside perspective, from someone that has had the experience, as you said, has lived the life, has been on the ground, whatever metaphor you want to use. But what the outside perspective offers is a holistic view of the ways in which any given organization might need to take a look at itself in building a culture that supports philanthropy and revenue generation. I think that a lot of organizations, what they know is that they need to raise money. What they know is that that is literally the bread and butter, enabling the mission to carry forward and for the organization to do its work. But I do think, and maybe I'll get in some trouble for saying this out loud, I do think that the sector is stuck in traditional models that don't take into account necessarily revenue diversification, that don't take into account earned revenue possibilities, that don't take into account impact investment, perhaps. Or, and here's something really quite shocking, maybe even merging with other nonprofits that share mission and share values, and the whole would be greater than the sum of its parts. And that kind of mindset, that the openness to that kind of thinking, I think has to come from the outside. Because the thing I do know coming from the nonprofit sector is that everybody is heads down, working hard, trying to do the best that they can, and they only have a view of what they have a view of, if that makes any sense. They're looking at what the lamppost is shining on, not necessarily the dark spaces outside of what the light is shining on. That being said, the thing I said I thought about what I could do. What I don't want to do, what I really will not do, is provide services in which I am a frontline fundraiser for an organization. Because I firmly believe that if an organization can afford to hire me on a consulting basis, then they would really do much better to make that investment in hiring a full-time fundraising professional that is embedded in the organization, that has the chance to really be part of the team and develop historical memory and build relationships with donors. They don't need me for that. There are a million good fundraisers out there that I know would be, thrilled to find alignment with the right organization. My
Okay,
my work. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I've already got 2 questions for you.
Okay,
Hopefully I won't
wonderful,
forget them,
wonderful.
but
And
keep going.
I'm a chatty Cathy, Lauren, so you gotta feel free to cut me off.
Okay,
But
let me ask my first question because I will
yeah,
forget them then. I'm going to cut you off.
sure.
Did I already forget it? Okay, I want to go deeper here. You've been at this less than 6 months,
I have.
and you are stating things that sound like you've been doing it for a decade. This is what I'm hearing. You are coming to clients with a very well-formed, you call it controversial, I'm going to call it well-formed perspective, which is causing them to think. I want you to take us to that first or second conversation you're having, to that point of transformation that they're having. Because my hypothesis here is you're coming in, you're hearing, we need a fundraiser, we need to, expand development. You're great at this. Can you help us? And when you come in is you say, wait a second, and you're going to take them through something. Take us through that very first part of what you're doing. I want to break it down because I think you're doing something different.
Yeah, that's I appreciate that insight coming from you as someone that has not grown up in the nonprofit sector the way that I have. I think that the first conversation is, you don't want me raising money for you. It's just what I
Okay.
was saying.
Yes. Yeah.
The second conversation is, okay, let's think about what you do need. Having somebody come in, whether it is a frontline fundraiser or a consultant, absolutely does not mean that money will start falling from the sky immediately. There needs to be planning and assessment and implementation of processes and procedures and ensuring that there's an appetite for self-investment. And not every organization's ready for that. But the ones that, even if they're not ready, understand that they need to get ready, are open to the conversation. And what does that mean, getting ready? It means, it can be very, very granular things like, does our financial system talk to our CRM appropriately? Are we
Small
able?
golf clap from the cash person here. Yes, that is it's a really important
right?
thing,
Well,
just
and
for
none of
everybody.
it,
Yeah,
I will be the
on a
first one to
spreadsheet,
say,
not a
Lauren,
yeah.
that none of this is rocket science. It is really about structural solidity. It is about a holistic view of all the different ways that the parts of the organization impact revenue generation. And I'm sure there are people out there in the for-profit sector that are like, what is she talking about? This is just what we do every day.
No,
But
you'd be surprised. Nothing is as perfect once you get into the weeds.
well, the grass is always greener,
Even big
right?
companies.
And yeah, but I will say, so in the sector, in the nonprofit sector, It can be as straightforward as that, or it can be, we only have one development person on staff, but we expect her to do 3 different jobs. Or we only have 2 people on staff and they manage all of development and communications.
Can I ask a
And
question? The leader of the nonprofit, do they typically not have a development background?
they can. More and more, I'm seeing that folks that came up on the fundraising side are being tapped to lead organizations. But I would go so far as to say, and this is a big generalization because it's a big field, but I would say that most of the time, the person leading the organization has either come up through the programmatic side,
Mhm.
meaning that they are an expert in XYZ mission area, which makes sense, right? Or they have come from for profit and they are the assumption by the board in making that hire is that this person has been successful in business or industry and they know how to manage an organization and we want to be more business-like. So that's a good move to make. In both of those scenarios, sometimes I think what happens is, I mean, unicorns are hard to come by in any sector, right? And really what is needed coming into a nonprofit organization, and this is just me on my soapbox, is a consideration of, does this person have the programmatic prowess, the experience, the stature in that particular subsector? Can they raise money? Or can they work with the development person to raise money? Because that's the job of every nonprofit CEO or executive director. And the one that sometimes doesn't get assessed as carefully is, do they know how to run an organization?
Hmm.
And so,
This
and
is fascinating.
those are all different skill sets, right? And so coming back to me, because, I get to talk today, the how I wish to be of value to any nonprofit organization is to help fill whichever gap is there. Am I able to work as a guide, as an advisor to an executive director that has never done fundraising? You bet. Am I also able to act as the person who can be in the corner of the development team? For sure. Sometimes what's needed, though, is the person that's going to help connect all the dots
Yeah.
between finance, operations, leadership, the board, HR even, right? Because oftentimes in a nonprofit at all sizes, you asked about whether the CEO has development experience. The same question ought to be asked, in my opinion, of HR. Not that they need to know how to raise money, but they need to know what to look for when hiring fundraising professionals. And sometimes there's a miss there because folks, and this is blameless, my saying this, but there's sometimes a misunderstanding about the knowledge that is needed to hire a really strong development professional. It's like hiring a systems engineer, or if you were in an academic medical center, hiring a genetics expert. It is that specific and that specialized, hiring the right kind of development professional. And not every HR team knows how to do that. Why would they? They never have.
Yeah. Do you street cred? So you come in and kind of act as the human glue.
Hmm.
Does your position as an outsider help you? Or are they more naturally hesitant to it? In big companies, they're used to consultants. And often, it's a very predictable reaction. It's almost like I
Hmm.
think of the cartoon characters, right? I'll come in or my team will come
Hmm.
in and this guy acts like this guy acts like that, like you're going into the office, like the TV show, right? Like they're caricatures. But that's, then there's a process after about 2 weeks, everybody airs their grievances, calms down. We all move forward. And then you take this position where being objective and sharing external experiences gives you street cred. But they're used to it. So the question is, in places where this model is not as common, how can you get there? Do you get there faster because they don't have the hangover of, a PwC engagement that went wrong? Or does it take longer or does it not happen?
Oh,
What do
that's
they
such a
think about you?
fascinating question. That's such a fascinating question because I would counter and say that actually, and this may surprise you and your audience, but consultants come in and out of nonprofits all the time. They may not be PwC, maybe they sometimes are actually, because if you're a large medical center, you're a large university, you're a large
You have the same needs. Yeah.
same, big six kind of engagement happens. Consultants also come in to do things like DEI work or to do strategic planning. So, there's a pretty high engagement level. I was going to say comfort level, but that's not true. necessarily. But what that means is that, yeah, folks, and I think this is a normal psychology, right? Folks tend to value that which they are paying for. And then as a consultant, you have to show your value. And for me, the way that I try to do that is to be authentic. I try to listen more than I talk. These are skills, by the way, that are not about me being a consultant. These are skills that I gained over time listening to donors. Because where did I come from? I was that frontline fundraiser. And that's the other thing that surprises people is that raising money is so not about talking. It's not about pitch decks. It's not about convincing donors of anything. It is very much listening, hearing what that donor wants to solve for, and helping them find a pathway to that solution. And, one hopes that the end of that pathway is, yes, I'm going to make a big investment in your organization because you are the ones that I feel confident will get to at least part of the way to a solution for this thing I care about. So take what I just said and apply it to consulting. It's actually not that different. And I would say that why I think folks have been listening to me, these first few clients I'm working with, is because I'm also very honest about what I know and what I don't know. And I will ask, especially the finance folks. I mean, goodness knows I've raised a lot of money, but I'm not so good on the counting of the money.
Hmm.
So having a strong partnership with finance and really leaning on them has been very valuable. But at the end of the day, yes, you're right. There is a credibility to the places that I have worked and the roles that I have had. And there is, I think, a fundamental, it gets my foot in the door and a little
Get
bit
your
of
foot.
trust.
It sounds to me though like by listening. This is why I always kind of go through this process in the first 2 weeks. Maybe we talk about the process. Like by listening, they feel heard. I mean, and I mean like not performative listening. I mean
Hmm.
really listening.
Hmm. Hmm.
And do you think in your first clients, do you think some of that is because you've actually made them feel heard? Are they telling you things that where they say, no one has listened to me about this, but
They don't say that. But what they do say is, whether they say it explicitly or whether it's implied, they do say, I'm really passionate about this, and there's a finite number of people that actually want to hear all about it. And the things that have been living in my head, I think could go really far. And right now, it's like between me and the piece of paper.
yeah,
And the value that I can add is, and have been, right, is to have those conversations and be the one that takes all of those pieces of paper and puts them together into an actual actionable step forward for whatever it is that that organization is looking to do.
yeah,
And, again, it's a skill I learned coming up in the field. I mean, the number of, for example, neurosurgeons and climatologists that I've spoken with over the years, me having no basic knowledge of, I certainly have no knowledge of neurosurgery and limited knowledge of the climate crisis. How did I do my job? It was by listening and putting the puzzle pieces together in my head and asking the right questions to arrive at a proposal narrative, a structure for a new center, an approach for talking to a donor, whatever it was, right? And I'm trying to reapply those same skills as a consultant.
okay. Again, I'd like to ask more questions, but I feel like
Go for
I
it.
want to make these connections for audience. You are demonstrating a couple of very core consulting skills that often people who have had long careers outside of consulting, where their job is to get shit done, don't express these as their primary skill. Okay. They have them, but they're not tip top. One is the steep listening, synthesis.
Hmm.
What you've just described is synthesis. All of the little ideas can get grouped and packed and packaged, and many of them set aside, but the most root and important ones get put into a framework that people can understand. But I think always you made this connection to me. I think more importantly, when they see that framework, they can see the bit where their idea came and helped that. And that is the key to building trust with the people you work with, because now they think, wait a second, no one's listened to me. Now somebody has. It's gone in. Maybe it will have impact because we've never done it in this way before. So they feel there's a real emotional piece to this. It's like when I used to do hands-on work, and this is back in the day when we were in the office or I would
Hmm.
travel, my favorite thing to do is be in a small room with two people who are really frustrated, like senior IC director kind of that
Mhm.
mid-level where they're fighting up, they're fighting down,
Mhm.
and we get on a whiteboard and the,
Mhm.
like, listening to them and then the synthesis and the packing. That's like
I love the picture you're making. I love a good whiteboard too, and, I miss those
yeah.
whiteboard days. But I think you're spot on, Lauren. It's the truth is, and look, now I'm gonna spill my guts to your audience. The truth is that I think people are extraordinary. People that choose to be in mission-driven organizations are not there by accident. They are choosing to apply their time, their energy, often working in a setting that is still trying to get beyond a scarcity mindset. And that moment of listening is important, but you know what? It's a joy to be the person who gets to listen because these folks, and I'm making a generalization because I can, irrespective to the mission, to the size of the organization, to the part of the world they're in, what all these people have in common, these programmatic people, these operations people, these finance people, communications, advocacy, every nonprofit's got all of these people. They've all got this vision in their mind of the impact they want to make. And sometimes the hardest part about being in that setting is feeling like there's nowhere to go with your ideas. There's nowhere you talked about
Yeah.
it as no one's listening, but there's also a nowhere to go with these ideas because it's really hard, I'll tell you, in the nonprofit sector to make a pivot quickly. It is the antithesis of, say, the startup world where everything's about moving quickly, where an MVP is totally acceptable. Very rarely does that happen in the nonprofit sector
Why not?
because it's the scarcity mindset, right? If you're going to invest, forget time and energy, monetary resources in doing something, you better have thought it through from beginning to end. You better have picked it up and turned it around 360 degrees to make sure that it can be successful. Because if you're going to spend money to try to do that thing, you better make sure it's going to have the result you want because you can't waste money in a scarcity mindset.
You can't waste money, but every dollar must have impact.
Correct.
And that probability of impact, there's a very high bar.
Exactly. And so better to keep doing the thing that you're doing that for the most part works, even if you are willing to take a bit of a leap of faith or even forget a leap of faith, even based on data that is available to you to make a change in structure, a change in process, a change in systems. The number of nonprofits that have seen in my life and continue to see that will stick with a CRM that doesn't work because it's too painful and too expensive to switch to a new one.
Would guess really hard.
It's
Bar is really high there because the switching cost on that particular one is
exactly,
not just dollars to implement, but like ability for the organization to adapt to a new system.
exactly. And then to ensure that you're investing in, let's say you get past the mental hurdle of making the change, spending what you need to spend in terms of time and energy and money in implementing properly. And that is often a challenge. So, I think coming back to where I hope I can add value, it's to be the person that is able to look that in the eye and make the appropriate recommendations and make it a little easier, for those, well, that manager that you just described that is now going to haunt me of, they've been wanting to change that CRM forever, but they haven't had the support to do it, helping that person make the case, or the CEO who looks around and says, I see all these moving parts and half the staff has been here for 30 years and the other half has been here for a year. And I need somebody to be bad cop so that I don't have to be.
Quite on the leaders of the organization. So if by and large there's a legacy mindset, sounds like there are some leaders though who are not only open to but are who are actively trying to drive change. What kind of good examples are you seeing within the industry there about these leaders? Kind of what are they trying to do? What innovative things are they trying to drive into their organizations?
The things I'm seeing don't sound very sexy when I say them out loud. It is things like doing change management well. It is things like building a solid leadership team so that the CEO is not doing it all by him or herself. They are surrounding themselves with the appropriate expertise. They are
What
doing
kind of
things.
expertise would they be looking for?
I mean, at the not in a nonprofit space, it can be anything from the person that knows how to do direct mail appropriately to the person that knows, that we do need to fix our systems, and I need a systems expert that can come in and really take that bull by the horns. It could be a chief of staff that will help with all of the moving parts. One of the best examples I've seen recently is a chief development officer that built an analytics team for development so that the organization could embrace the use of AI and the development of its own algorithms to identify potential donors based not only on capacity, but on propensity. That's some solid futurist thinking.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like it now, right? Like all we've been talking about is AI, but that process for that organization started 2 years ago.
What I'm hearing you say is first challenge for them is shifting the legacy mindset around what they need to do. Second challenge then is they're trying to bring in these capabilities that they don't have within an
Yes.
organization. But in a
Yes.
legacy organization where you bring in fresh blood, that you may not even have the capability to figure out what type of blood you need, let alone then having them assimilate and then actually be successful in those roles is really challenging.
Exactly. And then there's a third challenge there that we shouldn't fail to mention, which is navigating the legacy culture within the
Is that
organization.
driven internally or by donors or both?
No, I would, others may feel differently, but I do think it is driven internally. I mean, there's always a one eye on what is the donor thinking, what is the donor wanting, what is the donor going to resonate with. That's always the case. But in terms of how organizations, and I'll use this word, how they become calcified in certain approaches and belief systems, I think that comes from within. Again, leaders hiring people like themselves, people staying in an I've gotten into
Yeah,
trouble for
it's the
saying this, that
staying.
yeah, it's the staying. And I've gotten into trouble for saying this, that, I don't think it's healthy for the same executive director to be in place for 25 years.
It's not healthy for anybody. I'll
It's not
I'll
healthy
go
for
there on
anybody.
record with you. Like, it's not healthy for
It
them. It's not
happens.
healthy for that. Nobody is benefiting from
It
that
happens.
situation.
The other common dynamic that I have seen is the person who was in charge for 25, 30 years, ran the organization as a cult of personality. They retire, they move on, whatever it is. The very next person to come in has very little chance to be successful.
Yeah. Okay. So what you're describing here is a very typical mid-market dynamic.
Is it? Okay,
So
well, good. You're educating
oh,
me because
spot on. I've worked all over the map, like enterprise, because I hate this kind of thing. It's really what it boils down to. But it is very typical to go into, let's say, a successful business, a couple $100 million, definitely under $1 billion, legacy, been in business more than 25 years. I mean, the bar's that low. Okay. So, like in
Mhm,
the 90s,
mhm,
you would see this.
mhm,
Many of these businesses are older than that,
mhm,
but a lot of them started privately. They were family led.
mhm,
That family led then came into different leadership. That
mhm,
leadership stayed around, and there was never an infusion of new ideas. It's interesting you mentioned the finance people because I often find there's never infusion into the finance organization. Like those people, those are nice, cushy jobs.
mhm,
And without that, the problem is like you can't adapt, your business model can't adapt, let alone innovate. Okay. Innovation and adaptation are very different things. Your business model certainly can't innovate if it can't even adapt. And then the business model, meaning the cost structure, the revenue structure, the monetization structures, all of those economic dynamics, the technology behind managing those then certainly doesn't adapt because you never
mhm,
get like fresh, these aren't typically IT companies, although
mhm,
those exist too.
mhm.
So you're not getting the the technological advances. And then the talent I'm not going to say this word because it's too negative, but they're comfortable
Mhm.
and they get comfortable in their routine. And when you try and change that routine, even small changes, there's significant pushback. And then there's there's very few cheerleaders encouraging the change to happen. And so then the culture rots. That was the
Well,
word I
and
was
you
going to
asked
use.
about board members before. And by the way,
Yeah.
audience, you can't see me, but I'm vigorously nodding
Well, I
as
said donors, but to be clear, for those of us who are like me, board members, you buy a board seat, right? I learned this not too long ago.
well, yes and no. Yes and no. It depends on the organization, and that's a whole other we can have a whole conversation about board management another time. But what I'm saying though is that the kind of folks that you describe that have been in their roles for a long time, what that also means is that they have had all of that time to develop relationships with board members.
Okay.
And
This is a different dynamic.
they become entrenched, and it becomes difficult even with fresh blood in other parts of the organization to even make the case that maybe this person, for all of their, commitment to the organization, has maybe outlived where the organization needs to go.
Because of the politics of the board, like of
Correct.
the deep relationships. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, you see that. Definitely see that. Although I tend to find well, my experience is biased because the companies where we would be brought in, the board is usually on our side, right? Like
Mhm,
in a company where
mhm,
there's been in that kind of,
mhm.
um, so it's a bit of a different dynamic. That's really interesting. Yeah. I mean, it is a similar dynamic to the mid-market. I
Well, and
never thought
I
about it
mean,
that
it's so
way.
interesting to hear what you call mid-market, because mid-market in the nonprofit sector, I mean, I've worked in organizations throughout my career that had a $3 million budget to organizations that had a $2 billion budget. And the the stunning thing is that these dynamics we are describing are actually the same regardless of the size of the budget.
Yeah. When it changes for me is over 10.
Mm,
Like
I
over
can see
10
that.
billion, yeah, like it's different.
Well, because I can imagine why. I mean,
And they're
you'll have to
public.
describe it for me. But at that point, it's real money involved, right?
It's real money, but also, I think this is the dynamic of being publicly traded. It's that there
Yeah.
is constant leadership change and constant response and required response. And then the focus in the last 2 decades on technology and innovation and transformation, and that's
Mhm.
impossible to ignore when the press asks a question, when you're on the analyst call every quarter, like, you gotta answer that question. So you do get that pressure from them. So, like, maybe that's what changes the dynamic a bit. But, yeah,
Well,
I
see,
mean,
now you've got me
even older
thinking, what would
companies under
happen?
2 billion, yeah.
Yeah. No, no, and now you've got me thinking. Here's an iconoclastic thought for you. What would happen if nonprofits went public?
Ooh,
And I mean,
okay,
they
this
are
is gonna be a
public.
fun conversation.
They are
Okay,
public in
and
the sense
yeah,
that
what would
they're
happen if they went
501(c)(3)s.
public?
They're accountable to the board, to the attorney general, all of that, right? They are public in that sense. But I'm talking about, what happens when there are shareholders. Hadn't thought about that before, and that's gonna live
Okay,
in my
so
brain for a while.
let's break it down. So,
Okay.
meaning, what do we mean by public? So there are shareholders, meaning there are external voices who have a financial stake in the success of this entity, and
Mhm.
they are given a platform to use their voice and communicate.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's one thing.
But the
I
difference the
think
difference in my mind is, the analogous body to what you just described is the fiduciarily responsible board of a nonprofit, right? These are outsiders who hold fiduciary responsibility, who hire the CEO or the ED. So in that way, it is commensurate. But
do go ahead.
go ahead. No, no, go ahead.
Do they hold they hold fiduciary responsibility, but do they
Mhm.
also have personal stake in the, like, personal financial gain from
They
that's
do
the
not.
difference.
They do
Yeah.
not, and that is the difference. And what I'm saying is, who knows, Lauren, maybe we're inventing something new here, which is, if those board members or others in the world did have their own skin in the game, would large nonprofits be then induced to work and think differently?
Okay, so yes, they're of course they would be. What do you think would change?
It comes back to what you were saying, right? Well, two things. One is the external scrutiny would increase.
Yes,
The other
definitely.
thing the other thing that you're raising is, yes, external scrutiny, but also, gosh, what was I gonna say? Clarity of purpose. I think that a lot of a stakeholder or a shareholder in, pick your giant company, knows what their role is or what their role should be, right? Because they've done it,
They have they
probably
definitely have an opinion on it.
they
Yeah.
have an opinion, and they express that opinion, and they're compensated in some cases, right, to be on that board, which is not the case in nonprofit. But
Financial
the
stake,
the
yeah.
thing about nonprofit boards, and again, I come back to what value may I offer potentially as a consultant, is working with nonprofit boards. Because the through line there, the number one thing I've heard is the two sides of the coin not understanding each other.
What are the
organizations
two
that
sides of the
say,
organization and the
yeah,
board?
the organizations, the CEO, the staff that say, oh, we have this board, but like we can't get them to do what we need them to do. We can't get them to help us fundraise. We don't know, it's like really hard. And the board is saying to me, and I've had these actual conversations, the board is saying, we don't know what they want us to do. Our role is not clear.
Clarity.
Clarity.
Is
That's the difference.
Is it lack of strategic clarity? Because, like, I'd say, all right, well, if they had a strategic plan and they had a framework and they were following that framework and they were cutting out things that did not adhere to that framework, which is almost always the reason why things break down,
Mm-hmm.
then they could clearly communicate that and then we wouldn't have this problem.
That is not the problem I think that boards encounter. I
Okay.
think that the critical problem, and you're going to laugh when I say this, is that the mindset of the nonprofit board, right? You can take a board member who in his or her private life serves on the board of half a dozen major tech companies, is a major investor in another half a dozen tech companies, and you invite them to be on your nonprofit board, and all of a sudden they have no idea what to do. They don't. I mean, am I supposed to go ask people for money? Am I supposed to show up to meetings?
That? Yeah, they wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't know.
Yeah, this is my point.
Yeah.
This is my point.
I mean, I would think I'm supposed to ask you about like costs and revenue and development and
Correct.
your
But
financial operating
the
systems.
staff is saying the staff's job is to make sure that the board is knowledgeable and aligned and they feel like ambassadors for the organization. But when it comes down to work that they want the board to do, where I think nonprofits struggle is around literally the specificity and the mechanics of how to give each board member a job to do. I will ask,
That
for
is a
example,
yeah, no, this makes perfect sense. This is a perfect place for a consultant, especially
exactly.
one who is tenured.
Yes,
Because you're like,
exactly.
let me just like, you could probably, I mean, my guess is you could do this very quickly. You could figure out at least
I have
what
done it.
each
Yeah.
one needs to do,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like getting them
Well,
to do it is a different story.
and here's the thing, like, I don't know how much of your audience is in the nonprofit sector and will hear this, but I'll say this out loud as a baseline. Anybody can do this. Here's a freebie, which is don't treat your board like a monolith. You have to talk to each member of your board and really have a meaningful, this goes back to what we were saying about listening. You have to have a meaningful conversation with each and every one of them and understand what they are willing to do and not willing to do. Is this a board member that's comfortable in donor conversations? Is this a board member that is comfortable hosting things in their home? Is
Yeah.
this a board member that will open their Rolodex easily? Those board members are not all the same.
You would also tailor I would imagine you're the go-between tailoring what the ask is to what they want. I mean, that's a back and forth. Like
Exactly.
they're not going to do
And
this.
to have the tools and the structure and process, I keep saying those words, so that it is the lightest lift possible for each board member.
For the board member. Yeah.
Yes.
I was on a board, a small board,
Mm-hmm.
and we were trying to raise $30 million.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them time and time again, don't make me the one that, don't make me be the one that has to go do social things. Okay. Like, I'm not going to go ask my friends for money. Like, what you need to do is bring me to the meeting
Yes.
with the CEO of whatever local business, because I
Yes.
speak their language and I'm going to
Yeah.
cry in that meeting. And they need to
Yes.
see me cry because
Yes,
I have a
indeed.
personal connection to this organization. They didn't get that.
Well,
Right? They didn't get that at all.
I'm not
But
surprised. But you were probably
I'm like, how
handed a piece of
easy is
paper.
this?
Right. No, I mean, it's, again, none of it's rocket science. You were probably handed a piece of paper that said, these are the roles and responsibilities of a board member.
I wasn't
Straight
even
up,
handed that.
same for everybody, right?
Yeah.
And I would say, in the scenario you just described, how are they preparing you for that conversation is the question, right?
Yeah, not at all.
Not at all. And the number one thing I hear from board members or potential board members, the number one thing is how much they love the organization. And that's wonderful, because somebody would not agree to be a board member if they weren't deeply committed. That's number one. But number two is, I don't want to have to ask for money.
Yeah, because we're not money askers.
Well, so what
don't
do
have
I
the
say in
skills.
response? What do I say in response? As the chief development officer, as the VP of development, even as the consultant, my response is always, well, that's good, because that's not your job. You shouldn't be asking for money. No, we're going to make sure that dynamic is comfortable for all the people involved. What we need, Lauren, I'm so delighted that you raised this, because the thing you just described of being willing to go with the CEO, with the development person, to go meet
I
with a
mean, I would
donor.
literally, if they had set it up, I would have gone once a week. I would have taken half a day.
Exactly. And so many board members say things like that, and so few of them are taken up on it.
Is that?
Fear,
Are they
anxiety.
just like, my take was, well, maybe they're not actually that organized. Therefore, these meetings aren't happening because they're not genning up them, like if they don't happen, how could I go? So,
It's in empathy to my nonprofit brethren. I will say that it takes a lot of time and energy to get that dynamic right because and so to do it on a regular basis in an effectual way, it goes back to what we were saying about we're going to keep doing what works instead
yeah.
of
And
investing
that's
the
exactly
time
what
and
they did.
energy to do something different that might yield
It's,
better results ultimately, but that
yeah,
is a slow ramp.
they ended up scaling down the campaign and doing it in quote phases. And phase one looks like exactly what they have done before,
Exactly.
which does
That's right.
not solve the problem,
No. But
like
again, I say this
at
with
all.
utmost respect and empathy for the people in the field. I was one of them 6 months ago, but ultimately it comes back to, when your board member says they will host an event for you in their gorgeous fancy loft in New York City, don't wait 6 months to take them up on it.
No. Two,
You
three, 3 weeks.
move, buddy. You move, you call them the next day and say, "All right, when are we doing this?"
Yeah.
And that is often the biggest hurdle is moving quickly.
Yeah. This has been a great conversation. I have another topic for you that is off topic from this, but I
No, go
have to
for it.
ask you about the Chad Chronicles.
Well, yeah, thank you. The Chad Chronicles. So let me describe for your audience. The Chad Chronicles is a bi-weekly newsletter that I write for my own amusement, to be honest.
Somebody else's. Just,
Well, thank
I mean,
you.
we're
Thank you.
amused as
I'm
well.
I'm I'm humbled and grateful that others are finding it worth engaging with. So a few years ago, literally a few years ago, I was having a conversation with a young woman. I do a lot of mentorship, peer mentorship and mentorship, a lot of young women of color, and we were having a conversation about her job pursuits. And one day she says to me, something about like, do I push back? What do I say? How do I negotiate for the salary? And I finally was like, well, what would Chad do? And she said, who's Chad? I said, you know who Chad is. We all know
You
who
know who
Chad is.
Chad is. We all know
We do
Chad.
know who Chad is, right? We've
And
all
we know
encountered
his
Chad.
cousin Brad too. Like in their, yeah. So,
Exactly.
and
But Chad is the
she knew who
guy
Chad was, right?
who knew who Chad was. Chad is, and I'm not gonna pretend that Chad is all negative because the truth is Chad gets what he wants. He stands up for himself.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't hesitate. He's clear on his own worth and value, misguided though it may be. And so fast forward to just a few months ago, and I was having a conversation with a group of executive women, and they finally pushed me. They said, "Pradnya, you got to stop talking about Chad and do something about it." And so I started writing this newsletter. And every other week, it examines the world of Chad. One week, one of the latest ones you might find, I don't know if you read it, is Chad volunteered to be on a panel about menopause with the National Menopause Foundation.
Chad, think about menopause.
Chad had all kinds of opinions because, he doesn't hesitate to have an opinion about anything. He went to the panel thinking there might be hot women and, a chance to be on a panel and, maybe get some coffee. But
That's
you know,
hilarious.
but Chad always has something to teach us is really
Yes,
the
he
through line.
does. Oh my God. There was a funniest group chat about what is Chad wearing today? And like
Mhm,
what was funny was like everyone's idea of Chad was a little bit different. It's like we all have our
mhm,
Chad. My Chad
mhm,
did not dress in the same way that the other
mhm,
Chads dressed. My Chad enjoyed free technology polo shirts that he wore the
mhm,
logo into work, a rotating set of
mhm,
tacky, hacky polo shirts. And
mhm.
everyone else thought something different. So, where can
Well,
we
the
find Chad,
standard
you and Chad?
yeah, the standard Chad uniform for the Chad Chronicles, that's the newsletter. He's wearing a blue chambray shirt and a backward baseball cap, and sometimes he has a cup of coffee in his hand.
So, the Austin Chad wears a free McAfee polo and like sport weight stretchy golf pants
There it is.
and some kind of like dad sneaker. He drives a F-150, even though he doesn't need four-wheel drive for anything.
You are painting quite a picture there, Lauren. Seriously.
Yeah, he is he lives I had to live with in a world of Chads one time in my life, and thankfully I have escaped. But where can we find the Chad Chronicles? Because I
It
think
is on
Chad
LinkedIn.
needs to air it out on
Thank you
LinkedIn.
for asking.
Okay,
It's on
we'll put it
LinkedIn
in the
and
show
Substack.
notes. Yes, you moved to
Yeah,
Substack.
Chad has manspread to Substack, yes. And so if you just look up my name, because I'm the only Pradnya Haldipur around, you'll find him in both places.
Pradnyhaldipur. There you go.
Yes.
Pradnya Haldipur. She's it. And we'll put it in the show notes. Last question before our
Mhm.
hour is up. Have any Chads come out of the woodwork to say anything to you about this?
They have not. I'm almost disappointed,
Or are
honestly.
they not self aware enough to know that they are Chad? So thanks, Pradnya, for joining me today. This was a great conversation. We'll end it there. This really made me rethink the business of generosity and the commonalities between what we see in the commercial world, what others see in the nonprofit sector. I wish you all continued success with your job. It sounds like you're doing really great work and your impact is spreading beyond yourself, beyond one organization, but now to many organizations that serve millions of people. So thank you from me for the great work that you do and for sharing it with us today.
Thank you so much.